And there's a teacher of yoga that is very instrumental in kind of the modern movement of yoga, 1800s to the present, named Krishnamacharya. And he specifically would say about suffering, it's important to realize that suffering is real. And he would even say that suffering is an unavoidable motive for practice. And if we take a moment just to think about that, we probably all have experienced crisis or challenge or stress, you name it, in our lives, which has motivated us to deepen our practice, to spend more time or attention with our practice, and to grow more fully in our practice. So in that way, suffering is a very positive thing. Now, another message that comes across in the Yoga Sutra is that everything in our experience is changing. So you kind of see some of the parallels here with the teaching of the Buddha. Everything is truth and everything is changing. It's impossible to meditate and practice mindfulness without starting to realize that things are impermanent. They're always changing. The sutra also summarizes the process and the tools for self-understanding or gaining self-realization and enlightenment, just as the practice of mindfulness leads us toward. And ultimately, the Yoga Sutra is about the mind. Now, those of you who have experienced yoga classes in this country may find it a little bit strange that the Yoga Sutra is about the mind, because there's so much physical body stuff going on in yoga. And while that is part of the sutra, the body really is just a doorway to get into the mind. And so the Yoga Sutra as a text really is about gaining mastery and control of the mind rather than being controlled by the mind. Okay. So as I mentioned, we were going to talk a little bit about the second chapter, the Sadhanapada. And it describes the qualities that are necessary to change our mind from a state of distraction to a state of attention, as well as why these qualities are important. So keep that in mind, that we're moving from being distracted to being more focused, more attentive, more mindful. And it's in this second chapter that Patanjali begins to outline the 8 components of yoga. And we're only going to talk about the first 2 tonight, because I think that's most related to what our goal is here. So the first 2 components or limbs of yoga that Patanjali lays out. The first one is yama, Y-A-M-A, and that represents our attitudes toward our environment. And then the second is niyama, N-I-Y-A-M-A, and that represents our attitudes toward ourselves. And we can aspire to build these aspects or qualities within ourselves. But regardless of that, these are qualities that are naturally occurring, naturally developing, naturally deepening in a being who is progressing and moving towards a more awakened or enlightened state. So as we do our practice, these things are going to be naturally building within us. And I think that'll become pretty obvious as we go through them. So what I would like to share, I'm going to read some of these verses from a book and add a little bit of thoughts as we go through them. And I know that some of you like to have the Sanskrit terms, so I'll give those to you as well. So when we go into first yama, the attitudes towards the environment, Patanjali lays out 5 of those. There is ahimsa, which is often simply translated as non-harming. There is satya, truthfulness, asteya, non-stealing, brahmacharya, I'm having trouble there with my hand, brahmacharya, which is sometimes labeled as chastity, but we're going to take a different look at that. And then aparigraha, non-greediness. And one of the reasons that I chose the specific translation that I'm going to go over with you is because It happens to be, it takes a very practical approach and kind of modern look at the Yoga Sutra. And I'll show the book later at the end as well, but just real quickly, this is from a teacher, TKV Desikachar, and the Heart of Yoga is the name of the book. So here we go from the second chapter of Yoga Sutra, and this is starting with Sutra 2.30. Okay, so Yama comprises consideration of all living things, especially those who are innocent, in difficulty, or worse off than we are. Okay, that was ahimsa. The second one, right communication through speech, writings, gesture, and actions. That is the satya. The third, non-covetousness, or the ability to resist a desire for that which does not belong to us. That's asteya. The fourth, moderation in all our actions. That's brahmacharya. And so that's a little bit better look than chastity, because Desikachar is teaching towards householders, regular people, not monks or monastics. So moderation in all our actions. And then the fifth, non-greediness, or the ability to accept only what is appropriate. That's a parigraha. So we can see pretty quickly there that these give us nice guidelines for how to interact with our environment and those around us, and how they very closely relate to being mindful, being aware of how we're affecting those around us and how our thoughts and attitudes can affect those around us. And to go into a little bit more depth with these, because a few verses later, Patanjali expands on this. So as far as being considerate, the more considerate one is, the more one stimulates friendly feelings among all in one's presence. And so we probably all noticed that as we begin to respect others more, they do so in kind. I know that in my mindfulness practice, I've learned a lot about listening to others and being more present when others are sharing. And when that happens, they tend to be more receptive to hearing whatever it is that I have to say as well. So the more considerate one is, the more one stimulates friendly feelings among all in one's presence. So as we move on to the second, or satya, one who shows a high degree of right communication will not fail in his actions. When our thoughts and our words and our actions all align, then the results of what we do is what we've created in thought. So it reduces our failures because we are perfectly fully aligned. What we say we're going to do, we do. So that's a success. What we think we're going to do, we do. And that's a success. So when we have high degree of right communication, we will not fail. The third of the yamas, one who is trustworthy because he does not cover what belongs to others, naturally has everyone's confidence, and everything is shared with him, however precious it might be. Again, here, when we are trustworthy, when we're there for people, when we're not taking what is not ours, but allowing people to have their own experience, we build this greater sense of mindfulness and connection and community with people. And then we move to the fourth, or moderation. At its best, moderation produces the highest individual vitality. You know, if we overwork, or if we underwork, if we're lazy, if we sleep all day, if we don't sleep enough, if we don't eat the right foods, you know, all these things cause us to have both physical and mental and emotional challenges that we have to deal with. So if we can live in moderation, find that balance within the things that we do, um, it actually makes our life much easier. And mindfulness teaches us kind of this middle path, um, not reacting too severely in either direction to what we experience. And this is related to living in moderation. Now, the last of the yamas, one who is not greedy is secure. He has time to think deeply. His understanding of himself is complete. Now, if our time and attention is absorbed in a fear of lack, wondering if we're going to have enough, um, feeling like we don't have what we need, then it makes it very difficult to do things like meditate and contemplate the deeper mysteries of ourselves. But when we start to understand that our needs can be met, and when we're grateful for what we have, and start to see that this fear of lack really is just being out of the present moment, because typically when we're in the present, we have everything we need right at that moment. These are ways in which we can experience more gratitude and more abundance in our lives. Okay, so let's go to niyama from there. The ways that we interact, the qualities of interacting with ourselves. You'll see that there's a little bit of overlap here, but there's a lot of fresh in the niyama. So niyama comprises, first is 5 things here as well. First is cleanliness, or keeping our bodies and our surroundings clean and neat. Second, contentment, or the ability to be comfortable with what we have and what we do not have. Third, the removal of impurities in our physical and mental systems through the maintenance of such correct habits as sleep, exercise, nutrition, work, and relaxation. Fourth, study and the necessity to review and evaluate our progress. And 5, reverence to a higher intelligence or the acceptance of our limitations in relation to God, the all-knowing. Now, to share the Sanskrit terms with you on these as well, if you'd like them. The first one is saucha, and that's often defined as purity. The second, samtosha, or contentment. The third, tapas, austerity. The fourth, svadhyaya, which is self-study. And the fifth is ishvara pranadhana. And that would be the devotion to a higher existence. Okay, so to go a little bit more in depth on these 5 aspects that comprise niyama, as Patanjali lays them out a few verses later. Okay. When cleanliness is developed, it reveals what needs to be constantly maintained and what is eternally clean. What decays is the external. What does not is deep within us. So we get here an experience of impermanence. As we practice this aspect of cleanliness, we start to see how things deteriorate, how things change, and we start to see how the qualities that we build within ourselves maybe are a little bit more permanent than all those things outside of us. And then as we move to the second of the niyama, the result of contentment is total happiness. Now, how often can we say that we're actually content, that we're okay and accepting, truly accepting of what is and what is not? In those moments, we experience true happiness. It doesn't really come from anywhere else. Happiness is always in the here and the now. Now, the third of the niyama, the removal of impurities allows the body to function more efficiently. That's pretty self-explanatory. As we remove impurities from ourselves, our body as well as our environment we can function more efficiently. We can have a more clear mind. We can be healthier, and this supports us in our practice. Now, as far as svadhyaya, or self-study, study, when it is developed to the highest degree, brings one close to higher forces that promote understanding of the most complex. There's always this willingness within our mindfulness practice, within our yoga practice, to look within, to see what our motivation is, to see what our challenges are, to be willing to take an honest look at ourselves. That's the kind of study that this is referring to. And then the final of the niyamas, reverence to God promotes the ability to completely understand any object of choice. We can look at this as interbeing in a way, as Thich Nhat Hanh describes it. When we're willing to start taking this look at the fact that everything is connected, that everything is related, that everything is really made of the same stuff. Once we do that, then we start to have a greater respect for all things, including ourselves. And as we have a greater respect for all things, seeing this interrelated nature of all things, then we're able to look even more deeply at the mysteries of existence, at where we come from, what we're here to do, who we are in our purest essence. So these yama and niyama, as I mentioned, are just the first two components of the 8 components that Patanjali outlines. And, that's plenty for one talk. As we get into the other components, the other limbs of yoga, they are all very supportive of living mindfully and supportive of building these qualities. The third limb is asana, or posture. The fourth is pranayama, using the breath to move life force through us. The fifth is pratyahara, directing our awareness within to gain that deeper understanding of who we are. The sixth is dharana, or concentration, one-pointed concentration and focus. The seventh is dhyana, the actual meditation, using that concentration to deeply connect with the object, whatever it may be that we choose to focus upon. And then the eighth limb is samadhi, where we go beyond the sense of separation and experience fully the truth of whatever it is that we've decided to meditate upon. So all of these limbs support the qualities that are being built in the first two. And all of these limbs support us to live a more mindful, aware, and awakened life. Now, I mentioned that I'd show the book again at the end, so I know that some of you are always interested in finding new materials. Again, this is The Heart of Yoga by TKV Desikachar, and this is a good practical book. Very good to use and to apply things in life. Now, for those of you who just like to fill your heads with lots of material, I have another book that I'm going to share with you here. And this one is called The Yoga Tradition by Jörg Feuerstein. So if you're looking for something that's more of a reference kind of text that's full of info, I'll show you here just how full of info it is. So those of you that really want to get a lot of information about yoga, you can go for that one. I will say that it's a bit of a challenging read. Okay. So that's kind of what I wanted to offer as far as how these qualities of how we interact with our environment, with ourselves, is laid out in the Yoga Sutra, goes hand in hand with living mindfully, and they both support each other. It's hard to practice yoga without being mindful, and it's hard to practice mindfulness without actually practicing yoga, because that's just the way yoga and mindfulness work. Before I finish up here, I will offer that this coming Saturday, the 21st, there will be a yoga and meditation mini retreat. I've been doing those monthly now for several years, going way back pre-pandemic, but we're currently doing those online. So anybody that might be interested in joining that, you can start the registration process on the Dallas Meditation Center website if you go to the events, and that's coming up this Saturday. Otherwise, I will kind of leave it here and we can discuss, we can question and answer, we can share our experience, whatever you would like to do. So I'll give it back to Cornell at this point. Thank you.